To hear the radicalism, and again, to celebrate a Democrat primary victory by someone, we'll need to look into more Wesley Bell, but it's really celebrating a loss, which is kind of weird too, but of Cori Bush out of Congress. And now what she is saying is that, well, she said this is actually a good thing, is how she spun it. And now she's starting to sound like a member of Hamas. Take a listen to her speech about how this is actually good for her. Bite 2.
All you did was take some of the strings off. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid. AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.
I mean, AIPAC, again, a pro-Israel bipartisan group in Washington that is very moderate on the issue. It is, I would say, even like the ACLJ were more outspoken on some of the more controversial issues with Israel. We also don't take a lot of time. We do our work. We do the legal work. We defend Israel. We have that position. We're clear on that, and we don't waver. So we do it very publicly. I think that's the better way to say it. They are a little bit more behind the scenes sometimes, and they're trying to link other groups. By the way, AIPAC itself is not a political action committee. That's a public affairs committee, so it doesn't actually give money to candidates. But we know that they obviously wanted to see if they could remove any of these Democrats who were so anti-Israel. They're a group that works with a lot of Democrats on both sides of the aisle, and they have a lot of Democrats working inside AIPAC, their organization. So they're able to do an important role, kind of different than what we do at the ACLJ in Washington, D.C. for Israel. But this idea that she is now radicalized. So think about the language she used. I've been radicalized and I'm coming for your kingdom. Now, what's AIPAC's kingdom? AIPAC's kingdom is not their headquarters in Washington, D.C., I don't think. I think what she's talking about is the Jewish state of Israel, Will. And what is she going to do? Go, I guess, sign on with the Students for Justice in Palestine? I don't even know if they'd want her to be their spokesperson because she's so crazy.
Well, and Jordan, this is something that we even talked about yesterday on the air, how unfortunate a time it is in America when elected officials, she's still an incumbent, she's not out of office until the beginning of next year, but that she is comfortable in saying that all you've done is taken strings off. I had to behave when I was in Congress, when she's been an outspoken critic of American values for many times, for 2 terms as a congresswoman from Missouri. So why are we comfortable with this type of rhetoric in America? It is now okay for someone to be openly anti-Semitic, openly anti-Jewish. And I think we should also play this. This is from, before we talk about the vice president, and this kind of segues into that, the vice presidential pick, is that this was CNN at the rally in Pennsylvania where Harris and Walz were about to start speaking. And this was their commentary about why Shapiro wasn't picked for VP. Yeah. Now, this should shock anyone that they're so openly able to have this discussion about someone not being picked because he's Jewish. Let's go ahead, and this is a video bite so people can get the whole feel of where they were and the audio and why there's echoes. Let's go ahead and play bite 1.
And I think ultimately Shapiro, I think fit is important, but I also think that when you look at the principle of do no harm, maybe they did say, in a state like Minnesota, do we want to, those 100,000 uncommitted voters who came out about the Gaza war, do we want to antagonize those voters? Those are all part of the questions as well.
So, but can I just say,
Tim Walz also spoke conciliatorily towards those people. He said, look, that uncommitted vote is significant and those people should be heard. So having that kind of response, I think, is probably more of an open door to the parts of the party that have been very frustrated with the Democrats.
So, but just to one point on the Gaza war, Shapiro has the same position on Israel that Governor Walz, that Senator Kelly has. He's actually been more critical of Netanyahu than the other two, but he is Jewish, And
He's also the face of the crackdown on the protests, right? He spoke very vehemently about those campus protests as being anti-Semitic.
not all of them, the ones that were anti-Semitic, he criticized as being
Of course,
anti-Semitic.
but he was out front on the issue. So I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing that, again, for the activist wing of the party,
Sure,
they
absolutely.
felt was a slap in the face.
Okay, so I mean, literally, so he's a Jew who, as Jake Tapper points out, who spoke out against the protests that were anti-Semitic, not all the protests, just the ones that were anti-Semitic, and she says, true, but you know what? That upsets the activists in our party. And you know those 100,000 are in Minnesota? Do we have the picture of Ilhan Omar and Mike and
Tim Walz.
Yeah, Tim Walz? Because remember, that's what she tweeted yesterday. Every time you hear that Tim Walz is a moderate, think about this tweet from Ilhan Omar, who is just a vehement hater of the Jewish state of Israel, and she loves this pick. She loves this pick by Vice President Harris. I think it's disgusting that they can even have that conversation and feel like that's. I mean, could you imagine if it was about they were black, or what would you say about Tim? I mean, Tim Walz, like. Can we, I guess a boring white guy who they make up to be a moderate, even though he's an extreme liberal, who's backed by one of the top, top squad leaders. This is someone who is part of what we call the Hamas caucus, Ilhan Omar, and she can't get over the fact that they picked Tim Walz.
And Jordan, at the beginning of the broadcast, you mentioned the joy comment from the VP pick. And I think we should play that now. It's going to be bite 8. But especially when the commentary around the campaign is that the voters in Minnesota, the radicals in the party, would see picking Shapiro, a Jewish man who spoke out against anti-Semitism, would be a slap in the face.
Right.
That's the whole context of that discussion.
You can be critical of Netanyahu. That's not enough. You have to be critical of all Jews.
Right.
And you can't be critical of any protest, even the ones that happen to be racially motivated.
Exactly. And so, yet, at the same time, that's the conversation. That's the preset of them going on stage. This is what Walz had to say about the Kamala Harris campaign. Let's go ahead and play bite 8.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy.
And as you mentioned, it's just gaslighting. When the whole context around the discussion of him being picked is you are going to upset pro-Hamas anti-Semites. There's no joy in that. And if there is joy in that, that is something much deeper rooted problem within the Democrat Party. If that's what they see as joy, is getting picked because you weren't Jewish.
Yeah, the issues are going to be, they're going to try to bring up abortion. They're going to send him to what they say is middle America, which he called a bunch of rocks and cows. But I guess they'll try to ignore that because he was born in Nebraska, though is the governor of Minnesota, lives in St. Paul, the capital there, and that he will somehow again play this dad role or dad vibes and moderate, and he's got gray hair and he's a Lutheran and all those kind of things. He is extreme liberal who, when his city was burning, even admitted to, took the blame for letting the city continue to erupt into flames. Yes, he served in the National Guard. I'm not going to get into a tit for tat on his service, J.D. Vance's service. I'm not, because I think that's just below us as Americans. But what I do say is that don't buy that he's a moderate. Just go back to all you got to do. Maybe we should all wear the Ilhan Omar shirt as the tweet as a shirt or a bumper sticker on our car, some flag, because that's all you have to do to remind people is who are the people that were most excited about his pick, and it was the Hamas caucus that came out immediately in support of Tim Walz.